Hello everyone, I am Bradley Sward, Associate Professor of Computer Information Systems at the College of DuPage in Glen Ellyn, Illinois. And this video is part 3 of a series where we're going to be making a game called Boxxle, or Sokoban, depending on how you know it. And we're going to make it in GameMaker Studio 2, and then we're going to port it over and customize and create a C++ engine and use the SFML library to accomplish that goal. So in this video, we are part 3, so what have we already done? We've already developed the main menu, we've already developed the actual gameplay, so we have a working level. So if you need to fall back on the previous videos to get up to speed so you can follow along with what we're doing here. So part 3, as you can see here, we're going to solve at least these 6 things. Most of these I've already accomplished. The main one that is the big one here is adding file maintenance. We will do that last. And we'll set up all the other things first here. So we're going to design the actual gameplay for the 3 levels. And then they say, well, what else are we going to do? We're going to add a text file that maintains the best scores for each of the levels, so that every time we run the game, we'll have a maintenance of what the best scores are. So every time the game starts back up again, it'll remember how good you did in previous games. We're going to talk about object depth ordering. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll further customize the button GUI, or the GUI element, so that we can customize fonts and customize sizes and things like that. We're going to a simple thing here. We're going to make the player a little easier to control, and then anything else. There's one little thing also that's a pain in the butt, and I'll show you. It's just one of those little things that there's a race condition in GameMaker that's causing some issues with the score, not always, or your step count always being correct on screen as you're playing. So that's where we're going with this. Let me drag this over. That is my to-do list. So already here is, we have all the sprites, we have our fonts, we have our objects, and again, just kind of follow along here with it as I go. So here is my main menu from before. Here is my level 1 room, and so I have a level set up. I have a level 2 room, and I have a level 3 room, and say make sure they're playable. This is just the first level from the first Boxxle game, so it's like I've done this to death. I know exactly that will work. So that's a key to this, is to make sure your levels are winnable, because otherwise if you make them impossible, then nobody can ever beat them. So that's part 1 here, design all 3 levels. We already have the rooms set up. It's just a matter of going in and filling in the details with the object types. Okay, so the next step here, object depth ordering. When I play this game, I want to make sure that the player gets drawn on top of basically everything. And this X, because this X is supposed to be on the floor, but you kind of, I want the X to be drawn on top of the box. So if it was the other way around, you would never see the goals. Like, you think about it, right? The box would be drawn completely on top of the X, and you would forget where those things are. So what I want to make sure is that the player is drawn on top of everything, and then the X is drawn on top of everything else, and then the box is drawn on top of everything else. So there's like 3 layers to this. And I'm not using layering just because this game is very simple. There's not a lot going on. There's no reason to go on and add 2 or 3 layers to this thing, so it draws everything in different layers. And all I did was I went into the different objects and call it my create event, and I just added the attribute called depth, D-E-P-T-H. And by whatever reason, like when we're talking about panel values here, the more negative the value, the closer to your eye the object is drawn. So by having a depth order of -3, as counterintuitive as it is, that means that the hero will be drawn last, which means on top of everything else. So if my hero is depth of -3, and my goal has a depth of -2, and my box has a depth of -1, then everything will always be drawn correctly. So another thing you could say is, like in the level, like why don't I just modify all the properties, the instance layer properties? Like you could do that, but you'd have to do that for every single level that you create. And especially like for me, if I hand this off to designers and artists, like they're not going to want to do that. They're not going to remember to do that. So this way I've written some code so they never have to think about that. It's just going to work when they go and play the game. And so depth ordering. So once again, it's all good. You can try it out if you really want to. but that was pretty much it. So, it's just a matter that X causes a little bit of a problem. And of course, in the real world, the X would be written on the floor, but this is a video game, right? So that's not how things are supposed to go. Okay, so that is depth ordering. All right, another easy thing is, all I did for the hero class is I changed all the previous key press events, and I've changed them into key down events. Because when I press this key, there's this fun little if statement that basically asks, hey, am I moving? Basically, it's like, am I moving right now? And if I'm still moving, I don't do any code. So I don't have to worry about holding that button down any longer. And so it makes the gameplay a little easier for the player. It makes the movement a little easier. So all you have to do is just right-click, change event, key down, left, or right, or up or down, the appropriate one for each of the events. And of course, you can't change it to itself. And then, so now you run the game. And before, you would have to press the button every time I wanted to walk, but now I can hold it down. I think we can all agree that's a much better solution. And all it takes is just changing up the events. And so, and no code needs to change, just what event triggers that. So that was pretty easy. All right, the GUI component for the button. So what I did add is, maybe you noticed it already, I have a button down here in the lower left-hand corner for return to main menu. And so I parented to that main menu button class, which now doesn't have the best naming ever. I'm not going to change it, but you could change it to button base class if you want to. But you notice the sprite is different, and the behavior, of course, is different, because the behavior is return to main menu. So what did I do to accommodate for this? So first thing I did was I took the main menu button sprite, and I duplicated it, and then renamed it, of course, like gameplay button sprite, and then I cut the size in half. I just scaled it down. I scaled it 50%, 250 by 75, and again, you can use whatever you want to use for this kind of stuff. And then I went in and I modified the sprite slightly, so instead of it being clear, I added a gray, boring gray background to it, and then it still has the yellow tiling, or the yellow border, and then I have the yellow border with the gray background. So that is it, because those are the two sprite elements I need for any button class from what we did in the previous video. And then when I created the button object, I made sure to use that sprite instead of the other sprite that's been used by the other buttons. And so from a visual standpoint, cool, we have that working for us. But again, I want to make sure I parent this thing to the main menu button base class, and then I need to customize the behavior. First off, of course, I need to change the text to say return to main menu, but now you'll notice I changed things up slightly here to say my font is now, I can customize my font now just like I can customize my text. And so what I did here is I'm now going back into the parent class to modify this font, going into the parent here, in the create event, I set up a default for the font, and I say it's, if you don't tell me otherwise, we're going to use that main menu button font, which is in my case, a 50-point bold Arial font. It is what it is, right? So coming back here, but again, coming back, if I call an event inherited first, and then that'll set up the font to the default, and then afterwards I can go in and customize the behavior. So if I ran this down below everything, you wouldn't notice. I don't want it. Well, I guess I could do it just to show you what would happen if you do things in the wrong order. And there's my oops, because I set these two variables and then they were overwritten by the parent. And so I don't want that. And so just make sure the order is important for a lot of these kind of things. So run the parent event and then change the text and then change the font. And so the last thing I changed here, other than adding this one line of code here, is in the draw itself, I used that font variable instead of the hard-coded resource name that I was using before. So now whatever font is, everything's going to work out for us. And so you can continue to customize this. I am not going any further with this, but like you could definitely customize what colors get drawn for the off and on sprites and so forth and so on, right? The sky's the limit when it comes to your creativity, when it comes to what kind of behavior you want to add to a button class. But let me make sure I put everything back and everything is correct. There's my return to main menu, and it returns me to main menu. Good. So that's all I wanted to show for that bullet point of getting further customizing the GUI bug. All right, so one last thing. And so I already fixed this, so you're not going to see this in this demonstration. But if I play my game and I beat the level, and again, you will not see the same behavior I see right now. So right now, if I play this and I go, okay, I have one step left to go, what will happen in your game is if you press right and push the box into the goal and you win, the number 33 will never change to 34. It'll say you win, or I did it, or whatever the end condition is, but it will never change the value. But I fixed it up so it will. There it goes, 34 with an I did it. And so if anyone has a better idea of how to do this, because I've been toiling with this for many years, trying to find a better way to fight the interface and try to fight the way the GameMaker prints these things out on the screen. But let me show you what I did to make that little tiny thing. It's a tiny little annoying bug, but it is something that professionally you need to fix, right? Because if you get to the end, the player's going to go, well, I had 33 steps. I didn't have 34, and then they'll be mad that they didn't win because in the reality is they did make that 34th step. So in the gameplay controller, I added a create event, and I set up that has one property that was already in this user event. And I made, so you need this because this thing needs, because I'm going to be using alarms and all sorts of crazy things in user events, I need to make sure I define this has one, just like you would in C++ or Java. I got to make sure has one exists before I can actually tinker with it and test and use that variable. So all I did was just move has one equals false into a create event. The user event is updated slightly. And so the user event, remember, gets generated every single time the player ends a step. So alarm 0 calls with gameplay controller call event user 0. So every time a step ends, any step that the player makes, the gameplay controller user event is called. And that, again, that's exactly why we have to define this thing in the create event, because right now, if it doesn't exist and I get to this line of code, there would be a crash saying, hey, where's has one? And so now there was a secondary thing too. I have to make sure I don't reset my alarm, but all the major code is the same. This code is identical to what you've seen before. But now there's just an if check in front of the whole thing saying, if I haven't won yet, presume I have and then prove that I haven't, right? That was our find a counter example to tell me that I haven't won yet. And so this is the same as what we did last time. So if I do find a counterexample and say, you haven't won yet, when I fall through and exit this with statement, then I won't set the alarm, which means that basically instead of just doing it immediately, saying you won, I'm going to delay for 2 game frames the you won and everything else that we've done. So there we go. So if has one equals true, set alarm to 2, and that it'll never happen again because obviously it's only 2 game frames, but even if it could happen again, this if check would make sure that this does not get reset. And so the code we had earlier for what to do when you do win has just been moved into the alarm and just say show event, show message, I did it, and then go back to the main menu. So there's a lot going on there to get over one tiny little thing, which is just a race condition that GameMaker has, that win condition, the message box pops up prior to the draw event of the steps taken box in the corner there. So there's my 34. So that is what I wanted to do. That is the major touching up, or the minor touching up, if you want to think of it that way. I hate those little minor things, but that is. And let's see if we see any. If there's anything else, send me a comment. Send me an email about it. So okay, so that's everything that I've accomplished up to now, just basically on my own. So the final step here is to add the file maintenance to everything here. So I want to make it so that when I play the game, if I've beaten the level, any of the 3 levels, it'll tell me so. The button will say, hey, your best score or your best number of steps is 72 or whatever. And I just leave it alone unless I have won each of the individual puzzles. So I need objects, I need more controller objects to exist throughout here, and I'll need to create a file that gets maintained over the course of time. So, so the first step here is without even thinking of the file, what would I do if I wanted to maintain data across my game as I'm playing it? And so we probably haven't covered this. Depending on your experience, you may or may not have seen this. But at the very least, what I usually do when I'm doing something like this where I need to maintain data that my game needs to maintain throughout the entire game, I create an object, and I always call it game data, just so it's always my conventional way of doing things. And I make it persistent, which is now a big difference than every other object in my game. Every other object, when you go from room to room, are either created or destroyed. But a persistent object, once it's created, unless you explicitly say, hey, delete me, it will exist throughout the entire duration of the program, of the game. So what I can do here is put that game data object into the room. And again, I like to put controllers just up outside of the room in the upper left-hand corner. It's like the hardest thing is sometimes to remember to put that in there. But now I have my game data object, and I'm ready to go to set up game data. So let's see, in a create event, I can create an alarm, I'm not an alarm, an array. I'll call it besties. And I can set it equal to, and I'll just say 99. You should never need more than 999 steps to do this, right? And so this sets up an array. This is level 0. Maybe just for the sake of this, if this is level 0, let me put a comment here. This is level 0, or this is level 1. This is level 2. This is level 3. This is the best score for that particular level at any given time. So if you need, I don't have any videos on how to use arrays, but that is something, if you're looking at this at a more advanced level, you should know how to do already. So this game data object is maintaining this thing called besties. And so what I can do here is I can use this, since this thing is created and used and it exists in my main menu, I can go ahead here and override all the behavior for all the buttons. Because I want to print out, at least for the moment, I want to print out, hey, the best score is 999 or something like that. And notice we have a draw event. It's already taken care of for us, right? That's the parenting. So I want to inherit this because I want to call this code to do all the extra work that's already been done, and I just want to draw on top of it. So just in case I need this, let me just copy this, and then I will inherit this. So there is my event inherited. And this is level 1 button. And again, there are ways to, we could make this more generic. There's a lot of ways that we could be using more architecture and software engineering methods to, to make this so I don't have to use different object classes, but it is what it is. But I want to make sure I call the parent first, so it draws all of the sprite stuff first. I don't want to draw self, but I want to set the alignment here. My horizontal align I want to do from the right now, and then my V line should be the middle. I'm going to use, let's see, font. Let me just make sure there's a font. Okay, there is a font because of the way we have everything set up. But it's using the big giant font. So maybe I do want to change the font to the gameplay button font here. Not gameplay button. Yeah, just to use the same small font I used before. And again, naming, that's the fun of naming. It made sense at the time. It doesn't necessarily make sense now. But now I can come back and say, okay, leave the general font alone, but I want to make sure I do this. I set up the gameplay button font. And again, we can make this more generic over time. Because I want to set the color right, but I want to set this and that and whatever, but I want to draw, and for what I want to draw here is just let's just put something in before we worry about anything else. So let's see, I want to do X plus, or I can change this to say, give me the right bounding box minus 5 pixels. Give me the bottom bounding box coordinate minus 30 pixels. Let's just see what this does. And so, okay, so you can see now we're getting a little better. There's steps. It's right justified, right near the edge of the screen. So, whoopsie, I can bring this down a notch. This is just trial and error to get exactly how I want to. Okay, 10 is a little too few, maybe 13. Hard coding is fun. So there's my steps, and of course the color gets adjusted appropriately. So now once that's working, I can say, hey, my best number of steps, and then I could say plus, and this is where the fun is, like how do I get the data I want? And just to prove it's working, let me go back into the game data and change this just to be 997, 998, and 999, just so when we do this we can see that it's working for everything. And so best number of steps is, and this goes with the string value of game data dot besties at the one location. I hate how GameMaker does that, so there we go. And I need one more parenthesis. Come on, help me out. There we go. So now if I did this right, there it is, best number of steps 997, and that is the value that is in the one location. So that works, and so what I can do is I basically steal this for the draw event for the other two buttons. Let's see, I'm just making sure I didn't change anything else. Nope, didn't change anything else. So this I can actually copy, and then I can go into level 2, and then override. I hate when that happens. Let me just can I undo? Delete event, yes. And then I can I paste? Yes, I can paste. And so now I just want to say 2. I'm just testing it out. I'm making things a little more complicated than I need to. Whoops. There's no more paste anymore. I'm stealing that code, so then now I can override it, put this in, and say give me the 3. So just to prove now, there's 997, there's 998, there's 999, which is cool, right? So then now my final step is, let's put those values back to 999 for each of them. So then what I can do here, and again, I wasn't the smartest while I was doing this, but I can call event inherited, because this is the draw event. I want to make sure I draw everything, but if this value equals 999, then I want to return. I don't want to do any of the extra work. And again, this isn't always best practices, but it gets the job done. So now, there it goes. So now you can see it works for the first one. If I haven't beaten the level yet, it doesn't show me that I have a best number of steps yet. But for 2 and 3, where I haven't updated this, I do have this. So I need to go back in and go in right after event inherited, because I always want to make sure I do everything else for the button outside of the extra code that I may have to draw, and just change the appropriate value. Okay, so then now all 3 buttons should be disabled for the current moment. Excellent. Boom, boom, boom. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So now what we can do is go into, or a lot of little things, right? Go into this and go, well, if I go into a room, this game data object is amazing because it will store anything I want it to, and it'll update and keep it throughout the whole game. And I go, well, what current level am I in? Because this thing's following me around, and I can say no one. That's a keyword the GameMaker uses, and I believe it's like a -3 or something. It's hard coded in there. And so I can say my current level is no one, but if I click on the button, left press on this button, I say, oh, go to that room, but I can also say that my game data dot, I already forgot what the heck I called it. Let's just see down here. Do I get access to it? Nope. Oh shoot, what did I call it? I already forgot. I called it current level. And I could say, okay, you're level 1 because you're the level 1 button. And so I can also say then, okay, for 2 in the create event, or I'm sorry, in the left pressed event, I could say, okay, you are level 2. And for the left pressed event for number 3, I say, okay, you are 3. And what does that matter is because when you go and you beat the level, right, when you hit the gameplay controller object here, and you go, oh, I did it, that object, the game data object, will maintain what level I'm in. So this is great and all that I say, I did it. But did I beat the level? Did I beat it, and did I beat my previously high score? So I can actually go ahead and say if game data for besties, and hold on, who's maintaining the score here, right? This is the fun of this. So the score object is maintained by the player. So you're like, okay, let's just make sure of that. Hero, speed, score. Okay, so score is being maintained by the player object. So I can say, coming back into my gameplay controller, I can say, okay, if the hero.score is less than the game data.besties at the current level, right? That basically, then the current level should be equal to the score, right? I'm just saying, like, is this a better score than what I had previous? And if it is, then I'm going to reset that score. And what's cool about this, I only have to write this code one time because the current level variable being stored here is this part of this object, or gameplay controller, I'm sorry, as part of, oops, this is where things get fun. You got to make sure you put game data dot for everything. Hero.score game, because I'm not, I'm in this controller object and I have to get access to all this other stuff. So let's see if I did it. And if I'm hoping, crossing my fingers on this, that I did it right. Oops, compiler error. What have I got? Oops. No, wait, what's going on? I don't know what I did. Oops. Oh, score is global, built-in, and cannot be used. Oh boy. So let's see. Oh, this is the fun of this. They've modified the way score gets used. So let's see. I'm not 100% on this. Oops. It used to be a global, and then they changed it around a little bit, and this and that. So here we go. Let's just see what happens. All right, 34 steps or so. Not like they call me up every day and go, hey, Brad, we're changing this to GameMaker. Okay, I'm adding extra steps on purpose. Let's see. 46. I win. I did it. And there I go. There's my best number of steps. Cool, right? So that's 46. So what about this level? This one I can do a little quicker, hopefully. Add a couple steps just in case I want to come back and try to beat it. And I go, okay, there's 38. And there it is. There's my 38. And I go, okay, one more time. This one should be like 94, 95. I'll go as quick as I can. And that's what I'm talking about. There's no other way to get out. I can't hit escape or whatever, and I screwed up. So now I want to make sure I don't screw up, waste your time. But you can see each individual level now maintains its individual best score. So the final step would then be to maintain the file that keeps this data, so if I turn off the game and I turn it back on, that everything will be returned to what it was. But for session data, this thing looks like it's locked on, right? There's my 93. There's my 93. Every level maintains its correct data, and just to prove one more time, if I go back in here and I beat that previous record, since it's better than 96, it should do it. All right, I did it 34, and there it is. Cool, right? So again, right now, running the game again resets everything because there's no memory to this game. So the final step, now that we have it working, we've maintained a best score for each of the individual puzzles. What's cool is now we can set up the file. And so we can do this here in the main menu, I'm sorry, in the game data object in the create event. So what I can do here set all this stuff up, and now do a file check. And since the file doesn't exist right now, we don't have to worry about that. But let's just look up file, text, read, or just file, I gotta watch how I say that. File, text, open, read, and say, I'm gonna call it data.txt. And it returns a reference. So I'll just say var file equals. And so you can look at so you can always look up help if you really want to. This function opens the text file with that file name for reading only, and it returns a -1 if the file does not exist, which is what we want in the first case, right? No file exists at the current moment. So if file equals does not equal -1, then we're going to open up the file and do stuff. So we don't want it to crash, right? So if we don't put this if statement in there, it will crash on us if we try to access a file. So let's just try it out. Just make sure it doesn't crash and the game runs. So good. That object does everything it's supposed to. We're all happy. But now inside of here, if the file does exist, I just want to open it up, and all there's just going to be 4 numbers in there. These 4 numbers, and all I'm going to do here is just say besties. And to say, I'm just going to keep it simple. Besties0 equals file, text, read, real. And then I got to say which file. I'll say file. Okay. And so I don't remember if it reads, I don't recall if it reads like a null terminator or a delimiter or anything like that. We'll see as we go. And then I can say file, text, close, because you always want to make sure you close the file. And I believe even if it doesn't work, you can close it. Nope, I guess not. Never mind. It crashed on me. So I'll have to put this in here. Only close it if it opened it properly, which is kind of weird to me, but other languages don't do that. But now coming back, okay, so, but again, this code doesn't get activated because we don't have the text file just yet. So let's see, read, here, let me, just for the sake of this, because I know let's see, read line. I'll just do a read line. So I'll read a reel, I'll read a read line, I'll read a reel, I'll read a read line, I'll read a reel, I'll read a read line. And I don't need to keep it for anything. So I can just get rid of it. And I guess technically I don't need it at the end either. But now I should have all 3 level, and this code we'll test this code out in a minute here. But all I need to do now is when I beat the level, and I beat it better than I ever have before, I just need to update that file with the new records. And so I can almost steal this thing here, or the whole thing here. So what I want to do here is go back and go, okay, in the gameplay controller, in this alarm, okay, I'm setting the score in the game itself, in the game data object, but I also want to update the file. Make sure I do everything, tab everything over. Okay, so file check. I want to open for writing this time. Okay, and then I want to make sure I close it here. And so just, it doesn't hurt to, let's just make sure about this -1 thing. Yep, does the same thing for write. A -1 if it doesn't exist. So it doesn't hurt to have a little check here. And then I just want to write real. And let's steal this so I can copy this in place, because all I'm trying to do is write 4 values to the file. And then file text close, and then write. I'm just going to do the write line. I don't need any of this equals because I'm printing out to the file. So write, and then what am I writing? I am writing game data.besties0. So you could even do this, we could do this as a for loop. For var I equals 0, I is less than 4, plus I. Now that I'm thinking about it, we can make it a little more efficient. So print out the besties value to that file, write line, and then go on to the next, and then do it 4 times for each of for the 0 value, the 1 value, the 2, and the 3. And what's the error here? Oh, file comma. Okay. And then, so everything else seems to be happy. We'll test it out in a second here, but there's no compiler error at the moment. So what am I doing again? I'm opening the file to write. I'm testing to make sure I wrote it okay. And if I did, then I'm writing the data into the file, then all the updated data, and I'm only doing it if I have to. And then I go, I did it. Or you can even set this up, I did it. And then you can actually do this too, and you say, okay, show message here, and say, I did it, new best number of steps. Something like that. Okay, so let's try it out. This is the fun. There's a lot of code moving around. Did I do it right? So let's see, of course, there's no memory at the moment, but there should be now. Let's see. So I go, after I do this, there should be at least some memory, at least session data. And there I go. I did it. New best number of steps is 36, and there's my 36. So now here's the big test. I quit my program. Did it save it? And lo and behold, there I go. It saved it. That's awesome, right? So now for this one, just to come back real quick, do this one real fast 2 times. Because I can't beat the other one because I forgot to take extra steps. So I'll take some extra steps, extra steps, extra steps, extra steps. And then go and I go, oh, I got 44. New number of best steps. And I go, there's my 44. I can try this again just to show what happens if you don't get 44 and it takes you worse than 44. Because it should say I got it, but I should not, or I did it, and it should not let me win and get the new high score, of course. So there's 48. I did it, but 44 is still the best number of steps. So here we go. Did I do it? Did I do it? I'm pretty sure of it now at this point. And there you go. I have the best number of steps maintained. Session for basically the session is no longer available to you. It is now basically high score forever. And so if you wanted to have session data there, obviously you can just take what I did and just kind of advance it a little more. But every puzzle has its own high score in this file, and basically there's just 4 numbers, right? The array has 4 values in it, and I'm just making sure that that file and the array inside of memory while the program is running always holds the same data. And that's all I'm trying for. And so that is the last major part of what we're trying to do. I don't see anything else necessarily wrong with this thing. Maybe it's like the only thing I can see left here is if you don't like him running in place, all you have to do here is go into the hero, go into the create event, and just say, hey, image, speed, you're a 0. And now there are my best steps again. And again, because this is right justified, this will never go outside because it'll start from the right and move itself left as much as it needs to. So this will always be down here in the lower right hand corner. And again, if I haven't beaten the level yet, it doesn't show me anything, which I think is pretty cool. So coming in, okay, seeing he's no longer walking and running in place. But I think everything else is there. I have a way to escape if I screw up or if I don't want to continue on. The number of steps is always correct on the screen no matter what occurs. I have a win condition. Maintains the best score forever. And all the buttons work. So I think we're good. There's nothing really left for us to do when it comes to this. This is the game that we are going to now port over into C++ using the engine we're going to create and then using the SFML library. So if there's anything you need help with to get you to this spot before we move on and start moving into the C++ code and all of that understanding, send me a message, send me a comment, send me something so that I can help you through to get you where you need to go. Thanks for sticking through it here, and looking forward to next time. Take care, guys.